You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
I'm the current national team coach for the Cameroon Rugby League. It's one of the best games to play in regards to how long the ball stays in field compared to football, American football, rugby union. Rugby League is number one in those terms. If Rugby League was to get to Cameroon, how good would these guys be if they had the same opportunity that I had? The families would rather their children go out there and work rather than see them trying a sport where they have to pay money for transport to go to training. Two of my players have been signed to go and play in Australia. Africa is the future of the game.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find inspirational people who are doing inspirational things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today, we have a very special guest, Khalil Njoya, who is a former professional rugby player and head coach of the Cameroon Rugby League national team. Welcome to the podcast, Khalil. How are you?
Thank you very much, Tessa. I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm very, very good, thank you. You have a very inspirational story, which I'm looking forward to hearing today. Before we get started, I was hoping you could give us an introduction and tell us a bit more about Khalil Njoya.
Well, as you mentioned, my name is Khalil Njoya. I'm 28 years old. I'm the current national team coach for the Cameroon Rugby League. And I've been coaching for a little under 8 years now. I started back in England. I started playing rugby league at 11 years old. I also play rugby union. So I played both codes simultaneously. And I made sure I was able to pick up as much as I could from all the different coaches that I had from the teams, the regional sides I was in. And eventually that led to me coming back to Cameroon to help out with the rugby league that was growing here. I had a friend I had someone, I didn't know him, but he started rugby league in Cameroon. So I came to help out. And this is what got me here today.
Awesome. So you're giving us a good insight into who you are, your early introduction into the world of rugby league and rugby union, and also how you managed to kind of get that early inspiration to explore rugby league back in Cameroon.
Yes.
Rugby league isn't really well known in Africa. So for those listening to our conversation today who aren't familiar with the game, can you please explain what rugby league is?
Okay, rugby league is what we consider to be one of the toughest physical sports there is. Some people call it the greatest game of all. Well, most of us call it that, as we believe it is the best. It's a 13-a-side game with 4 substitutes, played for 40 minutes by 2, so 80 minutes. And I think it's been worked out that it's one of the best games to play in regards to how long the ball stays in field compared to football, American football, rugby union. Rugby league is number one in those terms. It's a very, very physical game, as you need to be able to put your body on the line week in, week out. I've been playing it for 16 years now, and it's really been difficult playing and coaching, learning the referee side of things. And it is the greatest game of all, in my opinion.
Awesome. I love your passion for the game. It comes through. You've given us great overview of what rugby league is and also your passion for it. As you mentioned, your early days, I'd be interested to know, how did you transition from being an amateur player to a professional?
It wasn't that difficult because from a very young age, we had professional players leading the way, teaching us and helping develop our skills. So as I mentioned, I started playing rugby league at the age of 11. And after my first season, we were picked into the London Broncos Academy. Back then, they were still known as Harlequins Rugby League. So we were in the scholarship. And throughout those scholarship, we had professional players that used to come down and help us out. We always went to watch the Harlequins Rugby League home games. So we got into that world quite early. So by the time we were old enough to be playing professionally, everything was all clear already in front of us. So it wasn't really a big move. But in the early stages, it was quite difficult because you start as a kid just playing for fun. And then a couple of weeks later, you're put in a scholarship team where you need to act professional. That was the toughest part of things. We're making sure that no matter where training is, you have to get there half an hour, 1 hour early, warm up, do your extras before you get on the field and train. So that's what we had to learn from 12, 13 years old. And we had to keep that comportment, that way of life till today.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that, Khalil.
No worries.
So you mentioned that you had professional players that supported you to transition from amateur to professional. Now you are a coach.
Yes.
How and why did you transition from playing to coaching, and how has the journey been like so far?
The reason I changed from playing to coaching was a mixture of things. One of the reasons was injuries.
Okay, sorry to hear about that.
No worries, mate. I was unable to play. Well, I could play, but I wasn't able to play at the level where I was. Unfortunately, I got dropped from the London Broncos. And from then, I took a year off from the sport completely. And then a year later, I returned and decided to take up coaching. I just walked over to the Croydon Hurricanes, which is my former club, my amateur club where I grew up. I went to one of their sessions and realized that they didn't have coaches. I offered to help them out, and I saw that I was good at it. There was a lot of things that the players didn't know about the game. Most of them were very, very good athletes. So the coaches there would just let them do what they wanted on the field, just pass the ball, let them run. But they themselves didn't know that rugby league is a structured game. It's not just about brute force. There's a lot of intelligence. So that's what I had to bring. And in the first season that I took over, the team had lost their first 3 games already. So on the 4th game, I took over. And one of the teams that had beaten us with a score of 50 points to 12, we played against them again. And we turned around the score and we beat them 60 points to 12.
Oh, wow.
And the players were very, very excited because all they did was they learned how to do their roles and they saw the results. And from then, we went the rest of the season undefeated. We won the league and the cup and winning by big margins. That same year, we had many players that got into the scholarship. One of those players that you may know is currently playing for Wigan and England. He played at the World Cup last month. His name Kai Pierce-Paul.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the youngest players in the England squad. So he's one of the kids that I've trained at Croydon Hurricanes. And they grew up to be great gentlemen as well. So that's what led me into rugby league, the transition. And from then, I just kept growing with these guys. As I was learning how to be a coach, I was showing them the ways as well. Everything I knew, I taught them, and they became better players.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Khalil. So you detailed how injury was one of the reasons that you started coaching, and now you've progressed to head coach of the Cameroon Rugby League national team.
Yeah.
Which is the reason we're here having this conversation, as you are on a mission to bring rugby league to Cameroon and increase its participation in Africa. What was the catalyst that took you on this journey or mission?
You know, funny enough, I thought about this since I was 12 years old, going back to the early days. When I first started playing rugby league, I looked at myself and realized that, I was a good player. I was big, fast, and strong. So I was always the biggest, the strongest, the fastest in the team. Possibly in the entire league, there were only 1 or 2 guys a bit taller than me.
Yes.
But then again, I realized that when I was in Cameroon just a few years earlier, there were like kids much bigger, much stronger, much faster than I was.
That's interesting.
So when I was in England, I told myself, if we were able, from the 12, 13 years old, I told myself, if rugby league was to get to Cameroon, how good would these guys be if they had the same opportunity that I had? So I said, no matter what happened, I would try and get rugby league in Cameroon. So that's when I found out a few years later that Carol Manga had started rugby league in Cameroon. Unfortunately, he's based in Australia, so he wasn't able to teach them the game regularly. He could go to the country maybe once a year, once every 2 years, and that wasn't enough to teach them the game. So around 2018, my brother was getting married. So I decided to come to Cameroon for a year. And that's when I went over to look at what they were doing in terms of rugby league. And 4 years later, I'm still here teaching them.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It really was amazing to be able to take the time off all the knowledge that I picked up from professional coaches, professional athletes, and bring it to these guys over in Cameroon. And they're really, really growing.
So you mentioned something extremely interesting there, that you had almost this calling or idea at the age of 12 to bring rugby league to Cameroon. Obviously, you're implementing this idea now. So what do you hope to achieve by introducing rugby league to Cameroon?
There hasn't been an African team in the World Cup yet. So I want Cameroon to be the first one to make it there. I know in rugby union, South Africa, they're king in rugby union.
Yes.
So if Cameroon can become the rugby league version of South Africa, that would be amazing. So that's what I'm aiming. And also growing up in London, we played in the London League. Even there weren't that many black kids playing rugby league. Whenever you talk about rugby in general, people say it's a white man's sport, even here in Africa. So I just told a lot of guys here that rugby league is designed for us. It's designed for the Africans. This is a sport that we would be amazing at. And I gave them myself as an example. We have guys like Ellery Hanley, who's one of the all-time greats. We have Martin Ofaya.
Yes. My mother's a big fan of Martin Ofaya, interestingly.
There you go, exactly. And these are guys that learned the game from maybe about 10 years old, 10 years of age. And if we can get more kids in Africa, Cameroon, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, all these nations to learn from that age and grow. How do we know that we won't have a nation full of Martin Ofayas, full of Ellery Handys? This is what my aim is. And one day, just one day, maybe a Cameroon against Australia final in the World Cup will happen with Cameroon winning. So this is...
Yes.
And it's possible because you saw in the football world not too long ago, Cameroon football nation played against Brazil and we beat Brazil. So why can't we do that in rugby league?
I agree, definitely. It's a great vision and one that I guess can be achieved in the not so distant future. In order to achieve what you have achieved so far, you had to be on the ground, you had to relocate from London to Cameroon. So you've lived in Cameroon for 4 years now. How has the transition been like so far?
Oh, it's been very, very difficult. The culture is completely different. Yes, I was born in Cameroon, but I left when I was 9 years old, so I didn't really know what the culture here was.
Yes.
I grew up in London, learned how everything was over there, came back to Cameroon, and everything's completely different. The weather, the people, the government, literally everything. You don't have as much liberty to do what you're able to do. A lot of the families don't really support children getting into sport. That's one of the challenges that we're facing. Because there's so much poverty in Africa where the families would rather their children go out there and work rather than see them trying a sport where they have to pay money for transport to go to training and come home maybe feeling a bit hurt physically. And it's very, very difficult. But we've been working and this hasn't been easy at all for us. But for me personally, the transition has been very, very difficult. I still haven't got myself used to it yet. I still believe very soon I'll go back to England or Australia or anywhere to play rugby league again. But I'll make sure I'm still able to come back to Cameroon every year to work with the team and keep the game going.
You mentioned there that the local kids aren't generally encouraged to take part in sport, which I guess links to the fact that when you arrived, there was no rugby infrastructure in Cameroon. I was hoping you could talk us through in terms of what have you had to do to create that infrastructure that you currently do have?
Oh, we've been working a lot on getting families involved, people in the community involved with the game. So whenever we have players, we have to make sure we get to know their parents.
Yes.
Those who use Android phones, we create WhatsApp groups because we know that sometimes we'll give messages to kids. They won't relay it to their families, to their parents.
Yes, I think that's universal.
Exactly. That's everywhere. So we create their WhatsApp groups with parents so we can keep in contact with them. So whenever there's events happening, they will know what's happening and they will be aware, they'll be able to come and watch their kids play. And that's a struggle because most of these families, as I mentioned, they're poor. Although Africa is a rich continent, the people are poor. Unfortunately, the poverty is taking over. And being able to just take a day off work or something to come and watch your kids play sport, which it doesn't really give you anything financially. So a lot of these parents have to think what to do. Do they go they skip a day of work to go and watch their kids play. And those who have done that have actually grown a lot closer with their children. Because when you're at home with the kids, you just do whatever you want. You sit there, watch TV, send them to go and work. They come back, do their homework. The day goes by, they grow. You don't get to know them. But through sports, the parents actually get to understand what their kids love, what is the passion that the kids have. And when they do this, it really creates a certain love that they never knew that they had for their kids. So they really, really enjoy watching their kids having fun, not just going out there working, getting tired, bringing a bit of money home, but watching the kids grow. And also Rugby League is something that we've been creating. It's a way for them to dream, because a lot of kids in Africa, they really don't dream. Not that they dream small, but some of them just don't dream at all. They just know that from the day they're born, they're just going to be poor. They're just going to work, make whatever money they make, get married, get old, and that's life's done for them. For the women, it's something similar. From a certain age, 15, 16 years old, they know that from then they'll be getting prepared for marriage, usually with people they don't even know. A lot of them get sent off as second wives somewhere they have no idea. And like I have a young girl, from the time she was 17 years old, her father wanted her to get married to one of his friends. So she just started playing rugby league. And when the gentleman that wanted to marry her came and had a look, and they told him, oh, by the way, she plays rugby league. She plays rugby. He was like, what? No, thank you. He literally ran off. He himself refused the marriage because he was afraid of what he's heard of rugby league, the violence behind it. He didn't want a wife that would be disobedient and violent towards him, but that's not the case. This is just the strength that rugby league gave this young girl. For example, her mother again was telling us that whenever she used to send her to fetch some water on buckets, she could barely carry one bucket. But now, after a few years of rugby league training, she can carry like 2 buckets, one on each arm, bring it home, go back out, get some more, and come back again. So these are things that have helped. And now the families are really, really encouraging their kids to get into the sport. And we're starting to get into primary school as well. We have 2 primary schools in my area that have decided to take part in rugby league. So very soon we'll be starting in school championships for kids 5, 6, from 5 years old to 12 years old. This is where the grassroots rugby league starts.
So I guess it's safe to say, although rugby is a physical sport, there's the physical and the mental strengthening aspect of it as well that contributes and helps with the development of whether it's young people or adults.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing you mentioned there, it was key getting people from the local community involved in order to create that grassroots infrastructure for rugby league in Cameroon.
Yeah.
So in order for you to achieve this, what support did you receive? Have you received support from government or private sponsors, individuals?
Unfortunately, we haven't received any support in Cameroon yet. We're still working, especially from the government. We haven't been able to receive anything from them. There's been a lot of people talking. They promise to help, but when the day comes, they just go back to being quiet. We do have a few friends in England. For example, I have a lot of my old teammates. A few months ago, I asked them if they could spare just a few pounds to help me buy some materials for my players here. Rugby league is a full contact sport. And here in Cameroon, they don't sell mouth guards. So I just wanted my players to have mouth guards. I know in Sports Direct, they were selling them for about £2 each. So I asked my friends if they could just give some money to buy at least 1 mouth guard each. And I was able to get about 200 mouth guards.
Oh, wow.
Just from my friends putting money together. And that was amazing. We got mouth guards. We got a lot of physiotherapy equipment as well. TENS machines. A lot of straps, like ankle strapping, because those are things that we really, really miss. It's so strange. You'd think the government would be willing to just jump into the opportunity to help the people, but again, it's the young people back home in England, in London, all around England that were helping me the most. We still have hope. We have great hopes that very soon the government will help, because we have people within the government that tell us that the people in high positions, they're aware of what we're doing. So they've been watching what we're doing silently So they're just waiting for the right moment before they can jump in and do what they can.
Thank you for sharing that. As you mentioned, so far you haven't received any support from government, but without any support, independently, you've managed to achieve so much with so little. I was hoping you could tell us what some of those achievements have been, such as the competitions and tournaments your team have competed in.
We've taken part in 2 African Cups.
Brilliant.
Yeah, they call the Mayor Cup. It's the Middle East and Africa, but the ones that we've been in have only involved African teams. The first one was in Nigeria in 2019, and 4 teams took part. Unfortunately, we took the 4th place, but there was a reason, and one of the reasons is from Cameroon to Nigeria, normally you can get there in a day or less than a day, but because of some war that's happening in certain parts of Cameroon, the roads were diverted, so it took us 5 days to go from Yaoundé to Lagos.
Oh, wow.
Which was a lot longer than we expected. So, and this was by bus. We got robbed on the way.
Oh, no.
The immigration officers, police checkup points, everywhere we went, they just wanted to take money from us. And a lot of them knew that we were tight on time. So they decided if we didn't pay them, they'll just waste our time so that we'll miss the game. So most of the time we had to give them what we could. And we managed to get to the game. Well, we got to Lagos around 7 a.m. on game day. And as we got there, the bus driver got lost around the town. So we looked for the hotel for about 2.5 hours. So around 9:30, we got to it. We finally found the hotel. We got in there, had breakfast, showered, got changed. And we were at the field for 12 o'clock. And at 1 p.m., it was kickoff against Morocco. Morocco, who had arrived a day early as they came by plane. So they had rested very well. And us, we literally just arrived from a 5-day bus ride. Unfortunately, fatigue took over us and we lost the game. But we didn't allow them to score any tries. They only scored penalties and drop kicks. But in terms of tries, they didn't score. Our defense was so strong. So we were named the best defensive team in the tournament.
Oh, wow.
And everyone that came there, although we lost both, to see what Cameroon was able to offer.
That's a massive achievement.
It really was.
Not only are you making big achievements on the pitch with the professional team, there's also big achievements with the local team, well, in terms of the local community as well.
Yeah.
So I was hoping maybe if we could have a bit of a discussion regarding that in terms of what are some of the positive social impacts of what you're doing? How have you seen the success of rugby or sports in general lift the local communities?
Well, for example, 2 of my players have been signed to go and play in Australia. This is something I've been really, really happy about. They're still in Cameroon, so we're just waiting for immigration to sort everything out so they can go out there and play. And for these guys to go there, it's like I always tell the story of NRL player in Australia, Micah Sivo. He moved from Fiji, I believe it was in Fiji, he moved to Australia to try his chance. And he wasn't going there just for his family or for himself, but the whole village. He was the hopes of an entire village. And this is something that we were looking to help in Cameroon, because we have a lot of these kids here that, as I mentioned, they're from poor backgrounds. They don't know anything else to do. They're born physically strong and they don't know how to use their strength. So Rugby League being able to bring something to their lives, give them another opportunity, another chance at life, it's opening people's eyes. So their family are now putting all their hopes on them. You have mothers that are 70-year-olds still going out to the road to sell maybe some food just to bring home some money for the kids. Their grandmothers are working. So these kids, they really want to do something for their family. So their mothers won't have to work that long. So their mothers can retire young and finally enjoy themselves rather than continue with life as they used to. So we have 2 guys that are meant to be going to Australia to play with the Kuma Stallions. And if everything goes well, the contract we have with them, every year they'll be taking 2 players. So that would be amazing to see 2 players go out this year. Next year, another 2 players goes out. And we have a couple other teams in Australia that are willing to do the same deal. So if this goes well, in about 2 years, we might have maybe 10 to 12 players based in Australia, just in Cameroon.
Wow. And I guess that also opens the door to other opportunities. I'm sure there are probably scouts or clubs
Yes.
from different parts of the world who are looking in at Cameroon rugby team and seeing what talent is out there.
Yep, exactly. Because we've had many professional players who have come out to say that Africa is the future of the game because it's a whole continent that is yet to be touched in terms of rugby league. So no one is really aware of what the future holds. But based on what we've been seeing with these guys that have been training for about 3-4 years, the levels that they've managed to get to in 4 years as adults, what will happen if these guys are given the opportunity at the age of 5, 6, 7 years old and
Yes.
given 10 years of training, 15 years of training, they will become some of the greatest players to have ever played. So Africa has something to offer, and the world is really waiting for that. This is one of the reasons why I'm in Cameroon as one of the pioneers. So I want to be able to bring this out to the people. And we have a lot of scouts that are always in contact with us, looking to see what type of players they have, specific players that they want. They might tell us that they want a certain player from certain age, certain height,
Yes.
and we may not have players that meet that standard, but we'll send them videos of other players. And when they see that, they get amazed. And then they end up calling for those. So that's how we managed to get these two guys to go to Australia. We also have teams in France. For example, as for me, myself, I have a club in France that wants me to come there and coach them. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to go there yet due to visa problems, but hopefully in the next couple of months, everything should be sorted. And as Cameroon is a French-speaking country as well, me going to France will open doors for some of my players to come and play there as well. And a lot of them can make the top league in France.
Oh, wow. So I guess there's so many different avenues in terms of what you're doing, creating the infrastructure in Cameroon and also opening up opportunities globally for the players, taking them from amateur to professional. So, in terms of the amateur side, the youth development, you're also involved in women's rugby in Cameroon. Was this always part of the plan? What have you learned from this in terms of the actual game and the social and cultural aspects?
Well, I've realized how difficult it really is coaching in general. Because when I was coaching in England, it was quite easy because as I came in, a lot of these guys understood the rules of rugby league already. So I was just
Yes.
teaching them a bit more of what they knew. But when I got to Cameroon, these are guys that had never played rugby league before. They never heard of rugby or never even touched the rugby ball before. So I had to teach them from scratch. And imagine trying to get players from amateur, from never touching a rugby ball to playing professionally in about 4 years.
Yes.
It's almost impossible to think of. But a lot of these guys are really working and pushing to get there.
Outside of the on the pitch, underground activities, how have you gone about raising the awareness about rugby league in Cameroon and, building up your team, your support network that helps or contributes towards the mission?
Okay, one of the things that we've been very lucky about is the national TV station in Cameroon has signed a partnership with us, which is to pretty much show everything we do. So whenever we have events happening, so this is one of the biggest help that we're receiving. So we get shown on national TV every now and then. I was able to get in contact with International Rugby League to see if I could have professional rugby league games shown on national TV here in Cameroon. No country in Africa was showing rugby league. So I chased these guys for about 2 years. I chased the Super League, the NRL, the International Federation. And luckily, I was able to get the 2017 Rugby League World Cup games given to me. And when that happened,
Amazing.
they also, because of the work that I pulled, they were also able to give it to the other countries like Ghana, Nigeria. This was really amazing to see that this is something I worked hard for 2 years, asking for these games. Now everyone in Africa are finally enjoying watching rugby league games on their national TV stations. So these are things that we've been working, and it's really helping us a lot.
That's outstanding. Fantastic. So you've developed the infrastructure of rugby league in Cameroon. develop youth and women's rugby, opening up opportunities globally for your players. So you've achieved quite a lot in those 4 years. Are you surprised by what you've achieved so far?
I'm very surprised, but also in a way disappointed because I believe that we could have been much, much further had we received help from the government, etc. Because everything we've been doing has been without any financial support, financial backing from pretty much anyone. For example, as I mentioned about the Mayor Cup in 2019, we went to Nigeria. But then earlier this year, in September, end of September, we went to play again in Ghana for the third edition of the Mayor Cup. And again, unfortunately, we came out fourth again. But this, again, is because Ghana was too far for us to travel by road. So we had to go by plane. And we just didn't have enough funds to send the whole team there. We managed to go there with 12 guys only. And in those 12, myself included, and Carol Manga, who's the general manager,
Yes.
both of us had to play. The game is played 13 aside, but we only had 12 players.
And no substitutes.
Exactly. Our first game was against Nigeria, so 17 against 12. And of those 17 Nigerian players, 6 of them played professionally in England. One of them, Rio, was he just won the Super League champion, the grand final with St. Helens that same week. So as soon as they finished, he flew up to Ghana to represent Nigeria. So these are guys that we played against. And during that game, we led Nigeria for half an hour. So we struck first, we took the first 2 points. And for half an hour, with 12 men on the field, we held on to Nigeria. But unfortunately, fatigue took over us.
Yes.
And that's when they started coming back. They finally won the game 36 points to 2, which is not that big. They were very, very disappointed by that result because they thought that Cameroon has 12 players, they were going to put 100 points past us. But for the game to finish 36 points to 2, they were very, very disappointed. And they knew that they escaped defeat because if Cameroon had come with the full team, we would have been the champions of the Mayor, the African champions. And all of them understood that. And they were happy that we came as we were, but they were ashamed of the result that they gave us. Because as I mentioned, in the World Cup that happened just now, you saw professional teams. England beat Samoa in the first game. I think it was 66-0 or 66.26. In the women's game, Australia beat France 94-0. A lot of the teams lost 84-0, 80-0, 70-0. These are scores that were happening on an 80-minute game with these professional guys. But us against Nigeria, they only beat us 36 points to 2. And we only had 12 players instead of 17. So it shows that the future of the game in Cameroon is very, very high compared to everyone else. We had no heritage players. None of our players had played in England or Australia previously. Well, apart from myself and Carol Manga. But the rest of the team, they showed that they deserve to be there and they deserve to be champions.
As you mentioned, the future of the game is bright, and despite the setbacks and lack of support, you've managed to achieve so much. So with the right type of support, how far do you think the game could go in Africa? What could it achieve?
That is a dream. It will go so far, especially as I mentioned about the grassroots that we've been working on. I worked in the 2 primary schools, just seeing what the kids are able to do. We play some tag rugby, giving them the ball in hand, and it's as if they just knew exactly what they had to do. These kids, 5, 6-year-old, have never touched a rugby ball before, never watched a rugby ball. You just explain something to them, and they did it. They did it exactly how we expected, how we wanted them to do. And it was just amazing. It was so amazing to see it. So if these kids, 5, 6-year-olds, are given 10 years of coaching, 10, 15 years of coaching, in the next 15 years, rugby league in Africa would be the biggest sport. It will overtake football in these countries. Yes, for the moment, football is king, but with enough funding to help develop the game, rugby league can overtake football, I believe. So we have that dream. We really, really dream of seeing that. It's not only going to be something for the players, as I mentioned, but it will get their families out of problems, out of poverty. It will get all the village. So the whole country will be willing to help them. Most people have been looking for other sport to support because they're sick of watching football. Football is not the only thing there is. So they're just looking for something else to do. And for us to be able to offer football to the population, they're really, really happy to see it.
Amazing, amazing. You know, I'm a massive football fan, also appreciate and love rugby. But I agree with you, it's good to see different options or opportunities in terms of sports in Africa, outside of football, athletics. So it's good to see things like rugby being discussed and also considered. So you've achieved so much over the last 4 years. And I guess with all those achievements are massive learnings for yourself. So what have been your biggest, say, takeaways from all of your activities over the past couple of years? How has it helped shape or change your thinking?
That's a tough one.
So much has happened.
Yeah, there's been so much happening that, for example, just me being in Cameroon, you know, when we live in England, we saw a few years ago, all these refugees running away from Syria, trying to get into the UK, get into Europe. A lot of people risking their lives, like taking boats, going across the Atlantic just to get to Europe. Most of them losing their life in the way. When you've lived in a country like Cameroon and see the way people are struggling, you kind of understand the reason why these people are doing that, why they're willing to risk their lives. So this is one of the things that I've been seeing. For example, Rugby League has given these guys a way to dream, a way out, where they can finally say, yeah, this is what I want to do with my life. Before that, they had nothing to think about. So this is what's been making me so happy to see happen within the continent. But now these kids can finally dream. And a few years ago, if you'd spoken to them and told them, okay, in 2022, you'll have nothing else in your mind except rugby league, they will just laugh at you and be like, what is rugby league? What is that? But today, there's a lot of the players that they dream about rugby league. They just sit there and start talking to their friends about rugby league. And I'm really, really happy to see that there are children as young as 5, 6-year-old. Whenever they go to school, they're always disturbing the head teacher, asking them, when are the rugby people coming back? You give them a football, they're like, no, we don't want football. We want to play rugby. So this is something like I've been really, really happy to see. And if we're able to get more help into growing the game, I'm sure like all these people around the world will be able to, I want to share that love with them, for them to come here. I have my friend, Nick Sadler from England. He's been to Cameroon twice or 3 times already. He's come here to see what's happening. He's helping us a lot. So he's the one that helps us get equipments from the UK, and he sends them over to us in Cameroon. And that's been helping us. If we had maybe 10 guys like Nick Sadler, Rugby League would be so far ahead.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned how seeing the kids' enthusiasm or just enjoyment of the game is something that is one of your biggest achievements whilst being there, which is amazing to hear. So I guess looking forward in terms of the future or in terms of your priorities, with regards to supporting and developing rugby in Cameroon and Africa, what are your priorities going forward?
Well, we need to get full recognition from our government. So when we get that, then we'll be allowed to get fundings from the government, from the sport ministry, the international federation. We want to continue playing international games so we can become full members with the international federation. Again, that will give us fundings that will help us develop the game all around. But one of the things that we're looking to work with is going global, going internationally around Africa. For example, whatever we're doing in Cameroon, we want to be able to do all that with our neighbors in Congo, in Cote d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Ghana, Morocco, Kenya. We want to be able to share all this with them. So we'll form a family and just grow together. So I'm really, really hoping to see all this happening very soon.
So I guess going global, going international in Africa is your key priority. That
Yeah,
is an amazing priority.
exactly.
So if we're looking in terms of your priorities, what you're looking forward to in the near future, what you're seeing happening actually within Africa in the rugby league scene, what trends in African rugby are you currently excited about?
Well, currently, as our women are preparing for the Mayor Cup in 2024, France has won the rights to host the 2025 Rugby League World Cup, which will be probably the biggest one ever because it'll also include the under 19s. It'll increase the women's team from 8 to 16, the wheelchair team from 8 to 16 as well. So the French World Cup in 2025 will be the biggest one. And we're looking for the next 3 years to find a way to get Cameroon to take part. We have a great opportunity to get our women there. As we stand, we have the best championship in all of Africa in terms of women's development. We have a tournament that we call the African Queens Tournament. So it brings together all the women's club in Cameroon, get them to play. And then so far, the champions for the past 3 years has been the Raiders Rugby League Academy, which is my friend Paul Yumbi's team. So he's been coaching them. He's been doing a great job with them. And they've won the tournament 3 years in a row. It's the only kind of its own in Africa. No other country is hosting that type of tournament for women alone. So that's why we're trying to push to make sure in 2025, our women will take part in the World Cup in France. And as we mentioned, so far we are number one in Africa in the women. So hopefully we can continue that way and make it to the World Cup. That'll be the first African team to make a Rugby League World Cup. So
And if you get
we're
there,
really looking forward to that.
if you get there, I'll definitely be attending. I'll be there
Exactly. There you go.
in the stands, cheering on Cameroon.
There you go. We'll get you a Cameroon shirt.
Oh, definitely. Hey, we're all brothers.
There you go. Exactly.
Fantastic.
It's just like the World Cup semi-finals, France against Morocco, supporting the African team.
I thought you were going to tell the joke that two African teams in the semi-final.
No. I've come to learn, but not quite.
So you've told us that obviously you're excited and looking forward to getting the women's team to the World Cup in France in 2025.
2025, yes.
Yeah, 2025. So I guess if we look to the future of Africa, where do you see rugby league in Africa in 5 years' time?
Well, I'm hoping in 5 years' time, we'll have at least 5 teams that will be full members. And if we have that, a lot of things will change. I also have an 11-year plan, to be honest. In the year 2033, yes. I'm hoping that Rugby League World Cup can come to Africa, to Cameroon to be exact.
That'll be awesome.
Why? Because when I mentioned to some of the guys from the International Federation, they laughed at the idea of the World Cup coming to Africa, and especially to Cameroon. And one of the guys, I won't say his name, but he told me that you guys would need to have multi-million sports stadium. So I laughed back and told them, Cameroon has all that. We just hosted the African Cup of Nations, the biggest one yet.
Yes.
And Cameroon has built many different stadiums. We built many new stadiums and full-size stadium regulations for Rugby League. So if we have big international games, we can host them in Cameroon. So why can't we host the World Cup if we're able to do that with the African Cup of Nations? The World Cup, Rugby League World Cup can come, and it will be a lot cheaper than, let's say, in England, France, Australia. So whatever budget it takes for them to host a World Cup there, we can probably do that here with 10% of that money and probably make it better. So the opportunity is there that in the year 2033, because as I mentioned, 2025 will be in France. Then 4 years later, 2029 is most likely going to go to the North America, either USA and Canada, or maybe it might go back to Australia. And then I thought to myself, 2033, why not Africa?
Why not?
Yeah. By then, the growth of the game would be amazing. It would be astronomical. So I'm sure people will think about it and say, we can do this. Maybe with a budget of something like £5 million, it can be done. And that's nothing compared to what's been spent in the other World Cups. So the dream is there.
That is a dream, definitely a dream. That is an amazing vision, seeing global and international sporting events coming to Africa.
Exactly.
It's something that I'd always welcome and look forward to seeing.
There you go.
So, looking closer to home,
Yeah.
where do you see yourself and the work that you'll be doing in 5 years' time?
In 5 years' time, I'm hoping to be coaching a professional team in the NRL in Australia. If that doesn't happen, maybe in England or France. But I'm hoping to be in charge of a professional team. And by then as well, hoping that maybe the entire Cameroon national team will be playing abroad. All the guys that I'm currently coaching would be there playing professionally or semi-professionally outside Cameroon. This is what I'm hoping for in the next 5 years. And then the development of the game. As we mentioned, we laughed earlier about the France-Morocco, about France being an African team.
Yes.
But if you think of it, if we have the opportunity, we have many Cameroonian and other African players living in those countries, but they don't know that their countries play rugby league. So maybe in the next 5 years, these guys will learn about rugby league in the nations, and then they'll decide to help out. So the level of the African national teams will increase vastly. It will get so much better. For example, Cameroon, I have about 7 players that are playing in England, the youngest one being 16, the oldest one being 23. So these guys are very, very young. And out of those 7, the youngest one, he played in the England Community Alliance earlier this year against France. 4 of them play in academies for Super League teams. One of them, Hugo Thomas, his parents are half Nigerian, half Cameroonian. So I'll make sure he plays for Cameroon.
Fantastic.
Oh, sorry to Nigeria, but I coached him as a kid, so I have first say.
Brilliant.
So it will be great to see all these guys come to play for their nations and grow the game in the continent in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I definitely believe in terms of building the team with the Africans from the diaspora and also the teams who are locally based in Cameroon as well.
Exactly.
We all come together as one, stronger together.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, African proverbs, affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
I have 2.
Oh, brilliant.
They're not exactly the best, but one of them is, I think it's an old Japanese proverb, which is, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than it is to be a gardener in a war. So this is for me to be able to to remain active, to stay fit, to teach these guys how to be strong. So when they go somewhere else in life, at least they'll be strong, they'll be fast, they'll be fit, and that will help them with a lot of things in life. So you need to always be prepared. So stay ready so you don't have to get ready. The other one that I would say is, I don't know who said it, but it's been around quite a while, which is the needs of the many outweighs the needs of the few. So this is something I often tell myself, that this is, again, one of the reasons why I'm here in Cameroon. I'm here to help the many. So I'm sacrificing my life to help the many, all these guys that are working. So if my life can be a sacrifice and make sure that these guys have better life, I'll take that. So the needs of the many outweighs the needs of the few.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing those with us, Khalil.
You're very welcome.
And I'll be honest, I've never heard the first one before. So
all right.
I'll be remembering that one.
It's definitely a samurai thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a samurai thing. And I'm a big martial arts fan as well. I love my old Japanese and Chinese and South Korean movies. And yeah.
There you go.
So I'll remember that one. As we're coming to the close of the conversation, do you have any closing remarks, final calls to action for people who are just interested in what you do, rugby league in Cameroon, rugby league in Africa? Maybe they want to find out a bit more information or even support what you're doing. Any closing remarks, final calls to action?
All right. I just want to thank, first of all, everyone that will be listening to this podcast. I want to thank them for taking time to listen to the whole thing. And all the people that have helped Cameroon Rugby League so far, whether it be in Cameroon, in England, in Australia, every single person. I really want to thank them for what they've been doing. I'm hoping that we'll get more support from those that will be hearing this, listening to this podcast. It's not easy, but I'm really, really thankful for everything we've got and we're doing. And I wanted to thank you as well, Teresa, for giving me the opportunity to come on the podcast to talk about our story in Cameroon, how everything has been going. So thank you again. Hopefully we can get some more help. We have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts, a YouTube page to follow our games and everything. So Cameroon Rugby League 13, that's where you can find us. So thank you again for everything.
Thank you, Khalil, for joining us today. That has been an extremely insightful and inspiring conversation. It's been great to learn about your journey and success so far. And one thing that inspired me is your passion and purpose has shone through this conversation.
Right.
And it's clear that you do have a love for the game and also the community. So keep up the great work. I'm sure people listening in will be inspired by your story and journey. Even if they're not inspired to take part in rugby, they'll be inspired to take part in something else to contribute to the development of the continent, which is what we all are striving for. So thank you.
Thank you very much for everything again, and really appreciate the support.
And we will be speaking soon. Keep in touch.
All right. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you, and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.